Hey guys, I hope you are doing well. I'm back with another story, and this time we are going to talk about Iran. Many of you would have seen the Hollywood movie Argo, where a bunch of US diplomats are rescued in the disguise of a film crew. Through today's story, I'll be telling you what it was and why it happened. And I'll be telling you how Iran, which looked something like this about 40 years ago, turned into this. And that's not all. You'll start making sense out of news articles like these. US imposes sanctions on Iran after missile attack. Iran threatens US after possible cyber attack on nuclear site. US kills top Iranian general in Baghdad airstrike. So if you stay with me for the next 15 minutes, we'll know it all. So we are going back in history. Put those seatbelts on. I'll talk very briefly about the medieval history of Iran so that you can appreciate its historical significance. Don't worry, I'll keep it very brief before coming to the meat of the story. Iran was known as Persia to the outside world till quite recently. Among the list of its leaders, it counts some very illustrious, powerful leaders like Alexander the Great, Nader Shah, Genghis Khan, and at one point in history, it spanned from as far as Eastern Europe to the borders of today's India. Islamization of Iran happened quite late, and before that, people of Iran were Zoroastrians. During the Islamic rule, the Persian Empire was one of the three biggest Muslim empires in the world, besides the Ottomans and the Mughals. We all know how Persian or Iranian civilization has contributed richly to the world of art, literature, and science. An important event in this period is that the Safavid dynasty declared Islam as the state religion of Iran. Qajar was the second last dynasty to rule Iran. The last few descendants of this dynasty were quite weak rulers. They ceded Iranian territories to the Russians while allowing British and Russians to control the region. The rulers received concessions and kickbacks from these foreign powers and squandered the money on personal travel and luxuries. The Iranians got so fed up with this that they forced the Shah to accept the constitution, which limited the Shah powers and created an elected parliament or Majlis. During World War I, Iran was occupied by British, Russian, and Ottoman troops. Though after the war, the Britishers had to leave under international pressure, and Russians got busy with the Russian Revolution. In February 1921, a commander in the Shah's army, who had risen through the ranks, deposed the weak Shah and took the throne. His name was Reza Khan, and he started the Pahlavi dynasty. The reign of Reza Khan can be credited with laying the foundation of the modern Iran. He carried out educational and judicial reforms, set up secular courts to handle legal affairs, which previously came under the purview of the Shia religious courts. He carried out many reforms for women. The minimum age for marriage was raised. He banned wearing of chadar or veil, and religious divorce laws were amended to more equitable terms for women, which previously favored the husband. He established secular schools for both boys and girls and set up the University of Tehran. So most of these reforms diminished the influence of Islamic clergy and their religious institutions. Moreover, Shah did not involve them in the political decision making. Shah was a fan of Western modernization and considered Islamic traditions as a hindrance to Iran's development. This alienated the religious class and invited their disapproval for the dynasty, something that the dynasty will be dealing with in decades to come. Yeah, Reza Shah did some dictator-like things as well. He monopolized decision-making, Majlis became just a rubber stamp, created strict censoring laws, outlawed socialist and communist propaganda, strengthened the military and used it to muzzle down the opposition. He oftenly stated that every country has its own system and ours is a one-man system. Now to expand trade and diminish British and Soviet influence in the country, Shah developed good relations with the Germans. During World War II, Iran declared its neutrality. When Germany invaded Soviets during the war, the British and Soviets asked for Iranian territory to be used for building supply lines to help the Soviets. Moreover, they demanded the expulsion of German nationals staying in Iran. Both the requests were turned down by Shah. Now, fearing that Iran might join the German side, the British and the Soviets invaded Iran in 1941. Reza Shah Pahlavi was forced to abdicate by the Allies, while allowing his son to continue as Shah as a concession. The reign of Mohammad Reza Khan Pahlavi, the son of Reza Khan, always lacked the legitimacy. since people of Iran saw him as an installation of foreign powers. So though like his father he continued efforts towards modernization of Iran, the people of Iran saw it as playing into the hands of foreign powers. It did not help that his regime had the tactical backing of British and United States, which helped him create a secret police called SAVAK, which helped him suppress voices of discontent. In the 1949 Majlis elections, the nationalization of the Iranian oil industry was a big agenda, since any development initiative in Iran had to be primarily fueled by the oil. But the oil industry in Iran was dominated by the British-owned Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, which shared only a small portion of the profits it made from the Iranian oil with Iran. The Majlis committee, which handled oil matters, was headed by Mohammad Mossadegh. The committee tried to renegotiate the terms of the profit sharing with the oil company, but could get only a slightly improved deal. So while the Iranian oil was used by the British and Russia in surviving the onslaught of the Nazi forces during the Second World War and was fueling the British economy, the Iranians were getting pennies in return. So the committee rejected the new offer and the Majlis voted to nationalize the oil industry. The upset Britishers recalled their technicians working in the oil industry, imposed a worldwide embargo on Iranian oil, and banned exports to Iran. This had a crippling effect on the Iranian economy, since oil production came to a virtual standstill. In spite of the setbacks, Mossadegh was starting to be seen as a hero in Iran, a champion of Iranian interests, who stood up against the foreign exploitation of Iranian resources. The Shah appointed him as the Prime Minister, under pressure from the Majlis and demonstrations on the streets. His growing popularity and power, and his resistance on the oil issue, was starting to be seen as a threat to the monarchy, and this created friction between him and the Shah. Fueled by insecurity and pressure from the British and the United States, the Shah dismissed Mossadegh from the Prime Minister's post, though he was reinstated days later after rioting on the streets in his support. Now, to protect their oil interests in Iran, the British and the United States took it to themselves to get Mossadegh out of their way and orchestrated a coup through their secret services, CIA and MI6. The joint operation was named Operation Ajax. The first coup attempt failed and the Shah had to flee Iran. But the second attempt, with support from the Iranian army, got successful, and Mossadegh was removed from the Prime Ministership. The Shah came back to power and sentenced him to 3 years in prison for trying to overthrow the monarchy, a sentence which was later commuted to house arrest. Mossadegh spent the rest of his days in his village till his death in 1967, while most of his aides in the ministry were imprisoned, sentenced to death, and executed. This reinforced the feeling in Iranians that the internal affairs of the country were constantly being interfered with. Having sidelined the opposition and feeling confident about his grip on power, the Shah announced a slew of reforms which he packaged as White Revolution. It included land redistribution among the landless, profit sharing for industrial workers in private sector enterprises, nationalization of forest and pasture land, and voting rights for women. The reforms were put to national referendum, which got an overwhelming majority. The new reforms rubbed the Shiite leaders the wrong way, and they aggressively opposed it. Primarily the land reforms and the enhanced rights given to women. Liberalization of women was tagged anti-Islamic, and land reforms took away large tracts of land that the religious charitable trust or Waqf previously controlled. The most vocal of these religious voices was that of a cleric named Sayyid Ruhollah Musawi Khomeini, who was a professor at a madrasa in the city of Qom and was accorded the honorific Ayatollah. He was arrested after a fiery speech directly attacking the Shah and his White Revolution reforms. The arrest sparked widespread unrest and violent protests, after which he was released but sent into exile. Briefly staying in Turkey, Ayatollah Khomeini arrived in Iraq, from where he continued his opposition to the monarchy through his writings and speeches, which were somehow finding their ways to madrasas and mosques around Iran. Through his book Vilayat-e-Faqih, Ayatollah Khomeini advocates that the government should be run in accordance with the traditional Islamic laws, and that the faqih, which means Islamic jurist, should be the real wielder of the legislative, executive, and judicial power. These thoughts found resonance in some, if not all, sections of the society, who had long witnessed the erosion of Islamic values from way of life in Iran through the modernization efforts of the Pahlavi dynasty. In January 1978, with the regime's approval, a malicious article appeared in a leading newspaper in Tehran, aligning the Ayatollah with extremely unsavory comments. This turned out to be an utter misjudgment on the part of the regime, to say the least. Youth and madrasa students took to streets and many were killed in clashes with the government forces. The dead were declared martyrs and more people joined their public mournings and protests, where more people died, and a chain of these events turned these protests into a revolution. Another important event which was instrumental in igniting the revolution was a fire in a movie theatre in the city of Abadan. More than 400 people were first locked in the theatre and the building was set ablaze using aviation fuel. While evidences emerged later that the fire was set up by radical Islamic elements who considered moviegoers as non-Islamic, the revolutionaries held the regime's secret service Sawak responsible for the incident. Any which way, the last nail in the monarchy's coffin had been firmly put in place. While in exile, Ayatollah Khomeini was closely coordinating the protests in Iran and demanding the abdication of Shah. In January 1979, after multiple attempts to reconcile with the revolutionaries and looking at the irreversible opposition that the monarchy faced, Shah fled Iran with his family. In the following month, Ayatollah Khomeini came back from exile after 15 long years. A referendum was held in Iran for setting up an Islamic Republic, which got an overwhelming approval from the people of Iran. 2,500 years of Persian Empire had ceased to exist. As envisioned by Ayatollah, the Islamic Republic is run under the guardianship of a supreme leader who has sweeping powers over the legislative, executive and judicial institutions of the country. Ayatollah Khomeini was the first supreme leader of the republic, a position he held till his death in 1989. In the year following the revolution and the resulting overthrow of monarchy in Iran, the Shah, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, requested to visit US for his cancer treatment. Though initially hesitant, the US administration granted his request to enter the country. The news fueled the rhetoric in Iran that the US was plotting with the Shah to reinstate the monarchy, and Ayatollah started giving speeches about the Great Satan United States and its covert ways of sabotaging the revolution. On the morning of November 4, 1979, a group of Iranian students with political affiliations stormed the compound of the US Embassy in Iran, holding about 52 American diplomats as hostage. The crisis lasted 444 days, during which some of the diplomats were rescued using Canadian passports and disguised as film crew. The incident has been fictionally captured in a couple of movies, the latest of which is the 2012 Hollywood movie Argo. The motivation of the hostage crisis was to secure the return of Shah back to Iran for trial and execution for the crimes committed during his monarchy. United States refused the demand. The crisis was resolved when the Iraqi military, with support from the United States, attacked Iran, which forced Iran to relent. So this was a short story which will help you understand the state of affairs of the country. And if you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, subscribe it now. All you have to do is hit the orange circular logo here and you'll start receiving updates about the stories that I post. Use the comment sections liberally for any suggestions, feedbacks, corrections or criticism. I'll see you with another story. Till then, take care.